So in chapter 30, he introduced us to the perfect participles, and we have perfect active as well as the perfect middle passives. Remember, perfect active participles are going to be characterized by the tense formative kappa. You had kappa alpha for the perfect active indicative, but it's just a kappa for the participles. And then the participle morpheme is going to be omicron tau, OT. Remember OT and new tau, Old Testament, New Testament, right? Those are the active participles. In between the Old Testament and the New Testament period was the intertestamento period. Okay? So there you go. Now, the perfect middle and passives do not use a tense formative at all. So we're just going to go straight to meno, mene, and the perfect stem will come before these, and then we're going to have reduplication, okay? Perfects reduplicate in the indicative and the participle. Aorists augment in the indicative, but not the participle. So we will see reduplication for our perfect participles. So with the parsing exercises, we get a chance to practice some of that. And let's just take a look at a couple, and then I'll open it up for you to ask a few questions of your own. The first one, I have gegenekatas. So what do you see here? Kappa. That tells you it's what tense? Or what tense stem? Perfect. Good. You see the OT? That confirms an active perfect, right? And participle. Look at your case ending here after the tau. What's OST telling you for case gender number? Genitive, singular, masculine, or neuter. Okay? What's my lexical form? It's genao. Remember genao? That's different from genomai. It's different from genosko. But a lot of people get these three mixed up. Genomai, I become, I am. Genosko, I know. Genao, I beget. I beget, bear, give birth to. We've parsed this as a perfect active participle. Do you see any reduplication here on the front end of this? Yep. See the gamma? Epsilon gamma, right? So we have all the pieces have come together. How would I translate this? Genaos to bear, to beget. We'll just go with beget. Is this active? Yeah, so we might translate it as having what? Begotten. Having begotten. So after having begotten, if it's an adverbial use of the perfect participle. Okay? All right. Now, look at number 2 real quickly. We have agapemenon. Agapemenon. You see the men on here? So what does that tell you about the participle? It could be middle or potentially passive participle. Now we have to know what stem it is to know if it could be both middle and passive or if it has to be one or the other, right? Because the aorist middle and passives can't be the same. Look at the front end of this. I have an eta. What is my lexical form probably if this is a verb that has to do with agape? Yeah, agapao. Agapao. All right, you guys remember agapao means to love. And look, the alpha of agapao has lengthened. That could be indicative, pardon my pun, of an augment. But if this is a participle, can this be an augment? No, but it could be a reduplication. And if it's a reduplication, it must be what tense stem? The perfect. And if it's the perfect, are the middle and the passives the same? Yes. Perfect middle passives and present middle passives are identical. Aorist middles are not the same as aorist passives. Okay? So, in keeping with the perfect middle passive, should I expect a tense formative in the perfect middle passive forms? Do perfect middle passives have tense formatives? No. The actives do, right? Kappa alpha for the indicative, kappa for my participle, but not the passives. So I go straight from the perfect stem to the meno mene. So this is in keeping with what a perfect middle passive would look like. The own ending is what? Genitive, plural, and okay, masculine, feminine, or neuter. This could actually be any of the three. All right? Because we're dealing with meno, mene as first and second declension. When we go to the genitive plural, the stem vowel is always obscured by the omega. So it could have been an omicron or an alpha that has been obscured by the omega. Okay, so how am I going to translate this? It's perfect if it's middle, the subject's doing the loving. If it's passive, someone's loving the subject, right? So let's translate it as if it were passive. How would we translate that? Having been loved. Very good. Having been loved. Okay? And if it's a temporal use, after having been loved. If it's causal, because someone has been loved. And so forth. All right. Do any of you have any questions about any of these parsing exercises? So let's look at number 10. We have apestalmenis. Apestalmenis. Do you see enough of a verb here to guess at what the lexical form is? What might that be? Apostello. What does apostello mean? Yeah, I send. I send. Good. So take a look at what we have here. I have apestalmenis. The mena. What does that help me to parse this with? It's, middle or passive participle, right? Now look at the front over here. I have apestal. So between the apa and the stello, I have an epsilon. What do you normally associate an epsilon with? Tacked onto the front of a verbal stem. Normally it's what? An augment. Can it be a reduplication? It can. If I have a consonant cluster like sta, I could reduplicate by using an augment. Using an epsilon. So that makes it look like an augment. Now take a look. Once we see the mena here, we know it's a participle. If I have something that looks like an augment, but it's a participle, it can't be an augment, can it? It must be a reduplication, which means this has to be the perfect. And then what gender, if after the men I have an alpha or if I had an eta, either of those, what gender would that be? After the men I have an alpha, eta, it's what gender? Feminine, good. And the iota sigma tells me it's what case and number? Dative plural. That's right. So it's dative plural feminine, perfect middle passive participle. Again, let's translate it with passive because it's easier to translate it that way. How would we translate this? Yes, having been sent. All right, good. So if it's middle, then whoever it's describing is doing the action for himself, for his benefit, or whatever. So it would be something like having sent someone. It's not necessarily reflexive, although middle and passives can be reflexive. But it could be having sent someone for himself. The middle voice could have a direct object, but a passive form, you wouldn't expect a direct object for those. Possibly, but you could also use the perfect active and then use one of the reflexive pronouns. Do you remember amauton, for example? So you could do that too. So use an active voice verb plus a reflexive direct object pronoun. Say auton would be you sent yourself. And he auton would be he sent himself. So you could use those forms too. Let's look at number 4. We have, for number 4, say this with me, pepistuken. All right, so pepistuken. What do you see about this that might help you know what tense stem you're looking at? We've got some reduplication going on here. Absolutely. So the pistu has a pe in front of it. What might the lexical form be? Pistuo. Good. And the reduplication tells me it's perfect. Good. Now, do you see the kappa over here? I'm expecting kappa alpha, right? Why do I have kappa epsilon here? Ah, yes. Well, let's deal with this question first. Is this an active or a middle passive form of pistuo in the perfect? It's active. If you ever see a kappa anywhere within 10 feet of a perfect form, it's active, right? So this can't be middle passive. So we know it's perfect active. And might it be indicative? Yep. Now, kappa epsilon, though, instead of kappa alpha, what one form is that characteristic of? It's third singular. Let's review. Leluka, lelukas, leluke. Like elusa, elusas, eluse. So this is a third singular form. All right? So how might we translate this? Yeah, he, she, or it has believed. All right. So, yeah, that's just one of those ones that you got to remember. Third singular's not going to have the full tense formative because it's basically mimicking the sa, say of the aorist there. All right. Other questions? Sure, let's look at 8. Now, we have beblemenane. Beblemenane. Say that with me. Beblemenane. Anything about this form might help you know what tense stem you're looking at. We do have some reduplication, it looks like, right? The beta seems to have been reduplicated. Remember, in the perfect, what's always going to be the vowel that separates the reduplicated consonant and the first consonant? We're looking at epsilon. Okay? You're going to see some verbs that have two consonants that are identical to each other, but an iota vowel will be in between them. All right? Like didasco. You ever seen that verb? Didasco, to teach. Okay? Those will be present tense forms. Perfects have the epsilon in between the reduplication. All right? We'll talk about that when we get to the me verbs. But so this is looking perfect. Now, we have menane over here. So what can you tell me about the type of verb form it is? Yeah, this is a middle passive ending, so it's perfect, and it's middle passive what? Participle. Excellent. Great. And then, look, I have an eta after the men. Mene. So is this first or second declension? It's first. And so it's what gender? Feminine. And in the first declension feminines, how many places does the new case ending show up? Only one. Where is it? Accusative, singular, feminine. All right? That's it. Okay. So what do we got left here? What's this blay thing stuck in the middle?
The lexical part is actually the question I had.
Yeah.
I know what it is because I looked at with Kyle, but
right.
We don't know how it got there.
Okay. Yeah. So what form is the lexical form? Who knows? What's that?
Is it follow?
Balo. Is this balo?
Pretty sure. Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely.
It is. Now, take a look at balo and look at the blay here. Are there any similarities? Yeah, beta and lambda occurs in both, right? So what's happened? What's the real root of balo? The real root. Not just the present stem, but the real root of balo. It's ball with one lambda, right? Can you see that ball has been modified to create the present stem? Right? And ball has also been modified to create the present stem over here. All right? And this is a fact of life. Things get modified to form different stems sometimes. Is this one where you might want to memorize the perfect middle passive? Yes, because it at least looks different enough that a lot of students keep forgetting that this is from balo. All right? Now, if you can, go ahead and go to your textbook and look at the appendix at the principal parts of balo, and let's just remind ourselves of what those forms are going to look like. So on page 374, the present, everybody say this with me, balo. So I throw balo. What form is that? That's the future. What is wrong with this future form? It's a liquid stem. Lambda's a liquid. And there's no keeping a sigma around a liquid, is there? So balo. Ebalon. Okay, that's the second. That's the aorist, and it's a second aorist. So we can see the balls here, right? And then look at the perfect active. Bebleka. Say that with me. Bebleka. So I have thrown. You see the reduplication, and you see the kappa alpha. So even though the ball has lost its alpha and tacked an eta after the lambda, you can still tell this is a perfect active, can't you? It's just a matter of you just got to get this one fixed in your mind. And the perfect is similar. Beblemai. It's got reduplication, no tense formative, but the maisaitai endings. So if you know bebleka, you can get beblemai too, right? And then ablethane. Say that with me, ablethane. So you see the blay in the last three, the ball on the first three. Okay? So similar sort of modifications of the real root to get the blay. What I want to remind you of then is if you take that perfect middle passive form, which was beblemai, you could predict what the participle is going to be by doing what? Well, you keep the reduplication, but you drop the personal ending, and then you add the participle morpheme, right? Beble, menos, mene. Okay? And that's what we're looking at. Beble, mene. All right. So there you go. How might we translate this? You could say something like having been, if it's truly passive in meaning, having been thrown or cast. Okay? But whatever it's describing is feminine and singular. All right. Other questions? For number 5, we have leluquia. Leluquia. What's my lexical form here? Luo. Good old luo, right? Now, what's happened to the lambda of luo here? That's reduplication. And then we have a kappa. What did I tell you? If you see a kappa within 10 feet, it's what? It's perfect active. Okay? So perfect active participle. Now I have this quia ending. We didn't really talk about this as I did that real quick summary, but what gender are forms with quia? They're feminine. So just like the neutal endings are third declension for present and aorist participles, omicron tau for masculine and neuter perfect active participles, but we're not going to see the OT here. We're going to see the kappa just with wea here. So this is feminine, and then that iota under the alpha is what case and number? This is dative singular, feminine. All right. You guys remember iota subscript in the dative singular? According to Mounce's rule, in the dative singular, iota subscripts where possible. Vowel's got to be long, and the iota will subscript under it. This alpha is a long alpha here. All right. So, dative singular feminine, perfect active participle. So, caught if it's masculine or neuter, quia if it's feminine. All right. So, how could we translate this? Having loosed might be one way to do it. All right, so look at number 7 here. We have pepoiekasi. Say that with me. Pepoiekasi. Now, when we have a form like this, we want to try to look for the most obvious things that would help us figure out what we're looking at. What's one of the things that might tip you off as to what kind of verbal form this is? That, to me, that's not one of the most obvious things. That actually is a little bit difficult. Yeah, the reduplication here can certainly be helpful, can't it? So I have a P and a reduplicated P right here. And that tips me off to the fact that this could be a what? A perfect. Okay, good. Now, what else do I see here? I have, if it's a perfect, a kappa. Now, if it's a perfect active indicative, what would my tense formative be? Kappa alpha. But here it's just a kappa. So what does that tell me about this kind of a perfect? It's a perfect participle. Now, am I going to see the kappa when the participle is active or middle passive with perfect forms? It'll be active. So this is a perfect active participle. Now, the second thing I want to pay attention to, aside from the front part, is then what's on the back. What do I normally have after the kappa for perfect active participles? It's kappa followed by what? Well, I need something before the case ending. The participle morpheme, which is omicron tau, right? NT for the first two that we've looked at, present and aorist participles active, or new tau. Then the perfect is omicron tau. And then my case endings afterwards. So I see the omicron of omicron tau, but not the tau. Okay, now why has that gone away? Because with the case ending sigma iota, what happens to dentals before sigma? They fall out. Okay, so this really is pepoiekatsi, the perfect active participle, but the tau is missing. What's the C case ending? That's dative, plural, and what gender? Masculine and neuter. Now, what's the feminine form going to look like? Well, that's if it's middle passive. It'll have the mene. But if it's a feminine form, that's a perfect active participle. What's going to come after my kappa? It's coming later, yeah. So there's something between the kappa and the alpha. Yeah, it's quia. Remember that? So my perfect forms are going to be kos, katas. You got to memorize these 6 forms. Quia, quias, and then kos, katas. Okay? Those are the nominative forms. These are the genitive forms in the singular. Masculine, feminine, neuter. What declension patterns are these following? 3, 1, 3. All right? So these are the perfect active participle forms.
How do you know that that's masculine or neuter and not feminine also?
Because the feminine dative plural would have been quiais, right? I'd be using this first declension case endings attached to a quia form. All right? Nope, no problem. Okay, now, so my lexical form is what? Poieo. What kind of verb is poieo? Contract verb. So the stem ends with a contract vowel. What happens to the contract vowels before tense formatives like kappa? They lengthen. And so the epsilon has become an eta here. You all see that? Okay. And then how might I translate this perfect participle? Yeah, usually with your perfect participles, the idea is that the action has been completed and then has some ongoing relevance to whatever point in time it's making reference. So you could say having done, or after having done. Those are ways to translate it. If it were a substantival participle, you might have an article, then it would be something like to those who have done, or to the ones who had done. Right? Those are possibilities.
Somehow in my mind I got poieo directly related to, instead of doing, making.
Well, to do or make, both of those are ways to translate poieo.
Okay.
So yeah, I would have given you credit for having made. Having made is fine. Perfectly good. Why don't you say number 9 with me, everybody? Bebaptismenu. All right. What do you think the lexical form is? Well, that's easy, huh? Baptizo. And what do you see in front of the bapt? We have some reduplication here. What does that signal to me about the form? It's perfect. Good. And then over here I have meno. What's that tell me? Middle passive and therefore participle, right? Good. I've almost got this puppy parsed. Okay, and then I have an upsilon on the end of that puppy. That's genitive, singular, and masculine or neuter. That's right. Could be either one. That's terrific. Great. And then a way to parse it might be, okay, yep, if we go with the true passive meaning, having been baptized. So yeah, in a real sentence, you'd see it in a context like when we're looking at the chapter 30 material on the genitive absolute, it would be might be something like autou bebaptismenu, him having been baptized, the Pharisees had lunch at McDonald's. Okay. What's going on there? Genitive absolute forms often occur at the beginning of a clause, and the person that is described or modified by the genitive absolute is usually not in the main clause. Okay, and it usually gives you temporal information. So I would probably translate it as something like, after some dude was baptized, the Pharisees went and had lunch at McDonald's. That he is not in the main clause, right? Now, if you had a middle meaning for this, then whoever it's modifying is not one who has been baptized, but rather one who has engaged in performing the action. And so a middle form would be something like having baptized. Yeah, whoever it's describing is the subject of the baptizing. Exactly. And I would expect direct objects, right? Clearly adult believers. Having baptized believers. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. So that's number 9. Others? Number 6 is bebaptismenois. Say that. Bebaptismenois. All right. Do you see anything obvious about this form? Reduplication. Absolutely. That means this is perfect. Okay. On the back side, we have meno. What's that? In which form? Voice. Middle or passive participle. Excellent. I have, what's my case ending? Sigma? Yoda sigma. I didn't know Yoda was here. Okay. You're right. After the stem vowel, I have the case ending. So if I have omicron or eta or alpha, right, it's whatever's after those stem vowels that is the case ending. So it's not just a sigma, it's an iota sigma. What case ending is iota sigma? Okay, so dative, plural, and then masculine, neuter. All right, why not feminine? Yes, I need an alpha here before the iota sigma. Menais. Bebaptismenais. Okay, so yep, that omicron is for masculine and neuter second declension. The lexical form is baptizo. Okay, and if you look over here, you have baptismenois. You might ask yourself, was that really what the perfect middle passive would be? And the answer is yes. And if you went and looked in your chart of the principal parts that you have in your appendix, which column would you look for to find the perfect middle passive indicative first singular of baptizo? You'd go to the 5th column. So let's take a look at that real quickly, just to show you how helpful this chart can be. Okay, so you see bebaptismi there? So that's in your 5th column, right? So what do you do to form the perfect middle passive participle? You keep the reduplication, you drop the personal ending. If there had been any tense formatives, you drop them, but the perfect doesn't have any. So it is precisely to this that we add the menomenes. And isn't that what we've got? Be baptis mena is menois. Okay? So So our perfect middle passive participles are using the perfect middle passive stem to form that participle. And sure enough, it's here. Okay, so translating it, if it's adverbial, we might say after having been baptized, if we're using a passive sense, right? So after having been baptized. All right. You didn't say sprinkled, did you? Okay. Let's look at number 3 real quickly, shall we? Repeat after me. Pepleromene. All right. Do you see anything obvious about this form? We've got some reduplication. So that looks perfect. Anything on the backside help me with this? Yeah, menomene. That's middle passive and participle. Good. Now look at what I have here. I have an iota subscript. Where do I see iota subscripts like this for case endings? Dative singular. Good. And finally, what gender would this be if I have an eta with that iota subscript? That's got to be feminine. That's exactly right. So that was easy, wasn't it? What's my verb form? Play-ru-o. Play-ru-o. This is a contract verb, play-ru-o. And when I add my middle passive forms to a perfect middle passive, any contract vowels will lengthen like this. Normally they lengthen before tense formatives, but the perfect doesn't use a tense formative, but I still get that lengthening, okay? And to translate this, how might I translate it? Okay, good. Using the passive translation, after having been filled or fulfilled. Okay? All right. Any other questions on this?